By 2050, there will be 10 billion people on Earth. In 1987, there were 5 billion.
Tear down this wall.
That's right, the world population has nearly doubled since the first Predator movie came out. And more people means more food. Now, feeding 10 billion people, that's not just a challenge, it's something we've never done before. We're talking about a planet-sized buffet that needs constant refilling, where innovation and ideas must outpace our appetites, or we literally risk biting off more than we can chew.
What was wasted last year would have fed our armed forces. That's like throwing victory into the garbage can.
But we're the human race. We invented the wheel, we harnessed the power of fire, we turned corn from this flimsy thing into this gigantic yellow monster. We even grew potatoes in space. So although feeding all these people is going to be a challenge, if we learn more about the world of food, we can all make the choices we need to make sure this huge round buffet table never runs empty. This is Real Ag.
Production of Real Ag is made possible in part by an underwriting grant from
Kansas Farmers Union, working to protect and enhance the economic interests and quality of life for family farmers, ranchers, and our rural communities. Learn more about our mission of education, cooperation, and legislative advocacy at kansasfarmersunion.org.
Yeah, wolves range across North America. There are some caveats to that, but some of those places they were eliminated from, they can be restored. Not Kansas. Yeah. There's no intact habitat to have wolves. It's all agriculture. What wolves preyed on there were probably bison or buffalo. They're all gone. Wolves need natural habitat. One wolf pack ranges over anywhere from, 150 square miles to 500 square miles, and that could be one pack. So you don't have anything like that left in Kansas that could even hold one. And to have a viable population, you'd need like at least 6 packs clustered together type thing. So yeah, it's not feasible. And then the other thing you do is if you tried it, you'd be literally cramming wolves down people's throats. And the backlash, the antipathy would be not worth it.
Before there were any boundaries drawn in this country, this land pulsed with a life deeply connected to its native inhabitants. Wolves and coyotes were not just creatures of the wild, they were integral to the balance of nature, vital players in an ecosystem that had thrived for millennia. Then came the settlers, travelers from distant shores seeking new beginnings, and with them arrived a desire to cultivate, to build, and to redefine the landscape according to unfamiliar ideals. To them, the untamed wilderness was something to be conquered, its wildness something to be subdued. Wolves and coyotes became symbols of the untamed, a wildness that stood in opposition to progress. Persecuted and misunderstood, these native beings faced eradication in the name of agriculture and safety. As these settlers transformed into ranchers and farmers, the open frontier became a patchwork of homesteads and grazing lands. Livestock, cattle, sheep, chickens, goats, became the lifeblood of the American agricultural dream. But with this new livelihood came an old challenge: the presence of wolves and coyotes. Predators following instincts that were honed over millennia, and each missing calf or lamb was seen as a tangible threat to survival. And the stories of attacks, sometimes true, sometimes exaggerated, cast these native predators as villains in the struggle to civilize the land. The livestock industry, growing in influence and organization, lobbied tirelessly, presenting wolves and coyotes not just as a nuisance, but as existential threats to agriculture and rural safety. Newspapers echoed their fears, and politicians aligned with their interests. The result was a series of government-backed actions, bounties that turned predator control into profit, and eventually, federally funded campaigns to eliminate wolves and coyotes from the landscape entirely. Millions were killed, and these efforts brought devastating consequences, not just for the predators, but for the ecosystems they helped sustain. To discuss this complex and compelling story, we'll be talking to Doug Smith, one of the world's leading wolf biologists. Doug has spent decades studying the impact of predators on ecosystems and played a key role in the reintroduction of wolves to Yellowstone. His work highlights how the loss of predators like the gray wolf, once native to Kansas, has reshaped entire landscapes. Today, these prairies have been transformed, their wildness replaced by farmland, and with it, the loss of species. Doug will help us explore how the disappearance of predators, the reshaping of landscapes, and the steady erosion of the untamed remind us of what we've lost and challenge us to rethink the future of the wild around us.
The grasslands economy was driven by buffalo. A lot of people call them bison. I think scientifically correct, it's bison, but the whole grassland ecosystem prior to European settlement was a bison-driven economy, and everything out there kind of hinged on them. Unless you bring them back, you really can't bring back a natural system. And what that means is they migrate, and they're a herd animal. So unless they move around, they're going to deplete the habitat, So it's got to be big. And so no place envisioning restoring the native prairie can accommodate that. So can you restore vignettes of what it used to be like? Yeah, probably. But they'll have to be managed vignettes. They'll have to be managed by people, because you won't have that bison wolf, to a degree, Aboriginal American component, which is what the system was. And everything else you had out there spun off of that. The grassland birds, which, by the way, this is important for Kansas, is in a free fall. They are the group of birds that are declining the most. Why is that? All their natural habitat is converted to ag, farm fields. If you restored some of the prairie, that would be a big, the grassland birds don't need the gigantic pieces of land that buffalo and wolves do. I think there's a couple conversations here. One is, does it make sense to completely obliterate a natural ecosystem? And you could argue that the reason those ecosystems look the way they do are millions of years in the making. And so intuitively, that doesn't, sound very good. And the other thing too, I think what really will help humanity is this idea that it's us and only us, and we're all the only thing that matters. I mean, I just don't think that's in the long run a healthy viewpoint. That whatever it takes to make the world for us is okay. That's another intuitive common sense thing that, you know, whatever humans need will do. And I think in the long run, that's going to bite us in the butt. I really do. And it's just kind of a grounded, more humble viewpoint in terms of how to exist, And, I'm 64. When I was young, I used to believe that nature controlled the world. Maybe it did when I was young. It's not that way now. Humans are firmly in control, with climate change, the pesticides, plastic in the ocean, airborne pollutants. I mean, the hand of humans is just everywhere. And so, what do we do with that? And when that occurred, I don't know, a decade or two ago, how do we manage that situation? And I think humility needs to come in with it. And how humility is we're just not exterminators of everything, and that's both animals and land. You're past the wolf debate. You're not past the coyote debate. Coyotes do great in farmland. In fact, there's two reasons coyotes did so well after European settlement. European settlement was basically hit the East Coast, march across the North American continent, and change everything. That's a very simplistic view of history, but there's a lot of support for that. And how coyotes benefited was, one, you removed their biggest competitor, wolves. Wolves kept coyotes in check. Now, originally, coyotes were not east of the Mississippi River. They were grasslands, they were mountainous, they were forests of the West. Removing their biggest competitor, that opened up a landscape for them to occupy. But the other thing is the creation of farms, the habitat conversion. Coyotes don't need those hundreds of square miles that I talked about at the beginning with wolves. Coyotes live in pairs. They produce pups. They kick the pups out in the fall. They can live in nooks and crannies. They can live in the backyard of a farm. They live along fence lines. They eat everything, from birds to birds' eggs, to rodents, to rabbits, to fawns, to sheep. And they're clever. And when they're around, you might not know it. When wolves are around, man, you know it. They live in packs, family groups. They're social, so they come in more than one a lot of times. Everything I just named, they eat, but they can't live off of. They live off the big critters. So you're going to see the big critters dead, and that's going to piss you off. Coyotes do all that stuff on a smaller scale without us knowing it. And killing off wolves paved the way for them to take over. And the other thing coyotes do, and I don't necessarily like it, they deal with humans killing them super well. Super well. So we combat them by the age-old kill them. And man, that's effective for a short while. And then boom, they're right back in. So, this wolf removal, yeah, we needed to do it to convert Kansas to ag land, but it opened the door on another set of problems, which I just explained, although I got nothing against coyotes. That's just a tip of the iceberg about how we think in terms of being in control of the world. We try and subdue it. And oh, by the way, what spin-off effects are going to occur by us doing that? A criticism I get a lot is, whether you want to restore natural systems or not, and that means bringing back wolves, people are here and they need to live, and they need to have families, and they need to have food. And Kansas is one of the best states at producing food, And so to convert it back to what I'm talking about, it kind of flies in the face of, civilization. And, you know, where I worked with wolf recovery is at the fringes of the breadbasket. Kansas is undeniably a world's breadbasket, and the surrounding states. I worked in areas that are not like that, and they can be they had more natural habitat intact. They're at the fringes of the use to humanity in terms of products. Now, logging, oil and gas, mining, there's always pressure to develop for those reasons, but it's not ag, you know, and you get into discussions, can wolves coexist with that development? Well, if you don't kill them and you don't kill their primary prey, which in the lower 48 is elk and deer, occasionally moose, occasionally bison, but mostly elk and deer, they're fine with development, actually, but that's where the work I did and Dave Meach did focused. It was not in the breadbaskets of the world. And Kansas is smack dab in the middle of the world's breadbasket. And so if you're going to restore natural habitat, which I fully support and I think it's a great idea because of the spin-off things grasslands bring to the table in terms of nature, I'd do it, but they're going to be small. Go for as big as you can get. Big is always better. Scientific research has proven that. But you're going to be constrained by private property. You're going to be constrained by productive agriculture. The pushback is Kansas is completely taken over by agriculture, wheat and corn and whatever, and life goes on. So that's the experiment. We did it, and everybody's doing okay. Maybe better because that's the economy there. But I think the thing about nature is everything takes a long time. And so, Kansas has been only agricultural the last 100 years or so, and that's a very short period of time in terms of ecological dynamics. And, converting a grassland ecosystem completely over to an artificial agricultural system is a huge natural experiment, and I don't think the outcome is there yet. There's just a whole host of things when you've converted that natural system on the scale that it was converted that I think is still unfolding. And so it just, to me, science and data aside, common sense not to convert when you come upon something, whether it's human or otherwise, whenever you completely change it or remake it, it's kind of common sense that there's going to be unexpected surprises and they may not all be good. And you may get away with it for a while, but it will come back and haunt you. Our whole human population growth has been helped by, fertilizers. You increase the number of bushels per acre. And where does that end? And then all of these phosphate-rich fertilizers get put on in massive quantities. Where do they go and what do they do? And, it might be fine for decades, but it's not going to be fine in the long term. But, I think the science is getting there that converting these ecosystems over completely is going to come back and hurt us. But as importantly, it's the common sense side of it. It just doesn't make sense to do this, to have something look like this and completely change it and expect everything to be okay. So I would use both of those arguments. I know a lot of people won't go for that, but it certainly, I think, has support to talk like that. What I encounter is there's two ways to view the world philosophically. Is if you think we're one species among many, that we need to coexist with these other species, you're probably going to like wolves. If you feel that the earth was here and created for human use, and that we're a species separate from all the other species, you're going to hate wolves. You're going to feel like they impede human progress. And human progress was settlement, you know. People have always killed wolves, wherever you're indigenous to, we've always killed them. But, the last few hundred years, it became industrial scale kind of thing. And it's because we converted, the human population grew, and we converted landscapes into human use, which meant wolf prey was gone, and we moved into domestic livestock, which wolves substituted for food. And so you hated them for that. The human safety thing is kind of BS. A lot of that is rabid wolves. And then the third reason is, when you're out there farming or you're out there hunting yourself and you see a wolf kill, they killed a buffalo, they killed an elk, they killed a deer, they killed a moose. Not only are they preying on my domestic living, my economic basis, but when I go afield to get food, they're killing that too. And, understanding predator-prey relationships, we're still trying to understand them. So 100 years ago, compensatory and additive mortality were terms nobody thought about. They saw a dead elk. That's an elk I could have eaten. So you stack up those three reasons, you just fit all that together, and the thing humans do best, no one's better than us at this, is making stories up. We're the absolute best of that. So you take everything I just said, and you have this rich mythology, this rich storytelling, and man, there's no getting rid of that. No getting rid of that. And so pretty soon, it's the recipe for we hate them. And it was mostly done with poison, but they shot them and trapped them as well. So yeah, it was a war on wolves, a war on nature. And the other tough thing about them is we wiped them out before we know what they did. Temperate zone and northern ecosystems are structured top down. And what that means is predator eats prey, prey eats vegetation, vegetation impacts nutrient cycling and things like that. That, in a nutshell, is how ecosystems are constructed. We wiped out that top layer, the predators, and in North America, the wolf is the dominant predator before we even had any idea what they did. And, just because of that kind of, almost religious fervor to get rid of them. There's a few times I have locked eyes with a wild wolf. It's momentary, we shoot them, we kill them. Why the animal would do that is beyond me. If I was a wolf, I would stay as far away from people as possible. I've done a number of studies looking at how wolves die, and most of them die at the hands of people. So when a wolf voluntarily chooses to stay for a moment or two and exchange a glance with you, really gives you a respect, admiration, appreciation of non-human life. And I don't know if those are scientific awakenings for me or insights, but they helped me understand wolves better, which did help my science in kind of unspoken, hard to define ways. But more importantly, I think it helped me function better as a animal. I happen to view an individual human like me, an individual wolf, as the same. We're different, obviously, in terms of anatomy, physiology, brain size, all that kind of thing. But we're both fit to the world we live in. And they helped me get that philosophy, And so when I write about wolves, I study wolves, that little kind of insight of watching them unbeknownst to me, but then watching them and I connect It's helped me as a scientist and a person. What's the cost of converting the planet, or a good portion of it, or any one region, to mostly non-natural condition? And I'm not saying I have the answer. I think that's something worthwhile to think about. What is the cost or the impact of that? And again, most people, when I say that to them, say to me, Kansas has been doing wheat and corn farming for 100 years. Everything seemed fine. And my answer to that is nature works at really slower scales. So this might be something yet to come. And so therefore, isn't the best way to live to be conservative, to be careful, which means let's not overdo what we need. You know what I mean? Let's not overdo. Let's try and find balance. And that just, to me, makes sense from a scientific standpoint, an ecological standpoint, and intuitively.
Production of Real Ag is made possible in part by an underwriting grant from
Kansas Farmers Union, working to protect and enhance the economic interests and quality of life for family farmers, ranchers, and our rural communities. Learn more about our mission of education, cooperation, and legislative advocacy at kansasfarmersunion.org.